Hello and welcome to the 10th and final reading of George Orwell's Coming Up for Air. We begin our reading on Chapter 4 of Part 4. I drove back to the George, jumping the car in the garage, and had a late cup of tea. As it was Sunday, the bar wouldn't open for another hour or two. In the cool of the evening, I went out and strolled up in the direction of the church. I was just crossing the marketplace when I noticed a woman walking a little way ahead of me. As soon as I set eyes on her, I had the most peculiar feeling that I had seen her somewhere before. You know that feeling? I couldn't see her face, of course, and so far as her back view went, there was nothing I could identify, and yet I could have sworn I knew her. She went up the high street and turned down one of the side streets to the right, the one where Uncle Ezekiel used to have his shop. I followed. I don't quite know why, partly curiously, perhaps, and partly as a kind of precaution. My first thought had been that here, at last, was one of the people I'd known in the old days in Lower Binfield, but almost at the same moment it struck me that it was just as likely that she was someone from West Bletchley. In that case, I'd have watched my step, because if she found out I was here, she'd probably split to Hilda. So I followed cautiously, keeping a safe distance and examining her back view as well as I could. There was nothing striking about it. She was tallish, fattish woman, might have been 40 or 50, in a rather shabby black dress. She'd no hat on, as though she'd just slipped out of the house for a moment, and the way she walked gave you the impression that her shoes were down at heel. All in all, she looked a bit of a slut, and yet there was nothing to identify, only that vague something which I knew I'd seen before. It was something in her movement, perhaps. Presently she got to a little sweet and paper shop, a kind of little shop that always keeps open on a Sunday. The woman who kept it was standing in the doorway, doing something to stand of postcards. My woman stopped to pass the time of day. I stopped too, as soon as I could find a shop window which I could pretend to be looking into. It was a plumber's and decorator's, full of samples of wallpapers and bathroom fittings and things. By this time I wasn't 15 yards away from the other two. I could hear their voices cooing away in one of those meaningless conversations that women have when they're just passing the time of day. Yes, that's just about it. That's just where it is, I said to himself. To him myself, I said. Well, what else do you expect? I said. It don't seem right, do it, but what's the use? You might as well talk to a stone. It's a shame, and so on and so forth. I was getting warmer, obviously. My woman was a small shopkeeper's wife, like the others. I was just wondering whether she might be one of those people I'd known in Lower Binfield after all, when she turned almost toward me, and I saw 3/4 of her face, and Jesus, it was Elsie. Yes, it was Elsie. No chance of mistake. Elsie, that fat hag. It gave me such a shock, not, mind you, seeing Elsie, but seeing what she'd grown to be like. For a moment, things swam in front of my eye. The brass taps and ball stops and proclane sinks and things seemed to fade away into the distance, so that I both saw them and didn't see them. Also, for a moment, I was in a deadly funk that she might recognize me, but she looked bang in my face and hadn't made any sign. A woman more, and she turned and went on. Again I followed. It was dangerous. She might spot I was following her, and that might start her wondering who I was, but I just had to have another look at her. The fact was that she exercised a kind of horrible fascination on me. In a manner of speaking, I'd been watching her before, but I watched her with quite different eyes now. It was horrible, and yet I got a kind of scientific kick out of studying her back view. It's frightening, the things that 24 years could do to a woman. Only 24 years, and the girl I know, with her milky white skin and red mouth and kind of dull gold hair, had turned into the great round-shouldered hag, shambling around on twisted heels. It made me feel downright glad I'm a man. No man ever goes to pieces quite so completely as that. I'm fat, grant you. I'm the wrong shape, if you like, but at least I'm a shape. Elsie wasn't even particularly fat. She was merely shapeless. Ghastly thing had happened to her hips. As for her waist, it had vanished. She was just a kind of soft, lumpy cylinder like a bag of meal. I followed her a long way out the old town and through a lot of mean little streets I didn't know. Finally, she turned into a doorway of another shop. By the way, she went in it, obviously her own. I stopped for a moment outside the window. G. Cookson, confectioner and tobacconist. So Elsie was Mrs. Cookson. It was a mangy little shop, but like the other one where she'd stopped before, but smaller and a lot more fly-blown. Didn't seem to sell anything except tobacco and the cheapest kind of sweets. I wondered what I could buy that would take a minute or two. Then I saw a rack of cheap pipes in the window, and I went in. I had to brace my nerve up a little before I did it, because there had need to be some hard lying of any chance she recognized me. She'd disappeared into the room behind the shop, but she came back as I tapped on the counter. So we were face to face. No sign. Didn't recognize me. Just looked at me the way they do. You know the way small shopkeepers look at the customers, utter lack of interest. It was the first time I'd seen her full face, and though I half expected what I saw, it gave me almost a big shock at the first moment when I recognized her. I suppose when you look at the face of someone young, even of a child, you ought to be able to foresee what it'll look like when it's old. It'll all a question of the shape of the bones. But if it had ever occurred to me when I was 20 and she was 22 to wonder what Elsie would look like at 45, it wouldn't have crossed my mind that she could even look like that. The whole face had kind of sagged as if it had somehow been drawn downwards. Do you know that type of middle-aged woman that has a face just like a bulldog? Great underhung jaw, mouth turned down at the corners, eyes sunken, with pouches underneath, exactly like a bulldog. And yet it was the same face I'd have ever known in a million. Her hair was completely gray. It was a kind of dirty color, and there was much less of it than there used to be. She didn't know me from Adam. I was just a customer. A stranger, an uninteresting fat man. It's queer what an inch of fat can do. I wonder whether I'd changed even more than she's had, or whether it was merely that she wasn't expecting to see me or whatever, and what was the likeliest of all, she's simply forgotten my existence. Deafening, she said, in the listless way you have. I want a pipe, I said flatly. A briar pipe. A pipe. Now just let me see. I know we got some pipes somewhere. Now, where did I? Here we are. She took a cardboard box full of pipes from somewhere under the counter. How bad her accent had got, or maybe I was just imagining that, because my own standards had changed. But no, she used to be so superior. All the girls at the Lily Whites were so superior, and she'd been a member of the Vicar's reading circle. I swear she never used to drop her H's. It's queer how the women go to pieces once they're married. I fiddled among the pipes for a moment and pretended to look over them. Finally, I said, I'd like one with an amber mouthpiece. Amber. I don't know as we got any. She turned towards the back of the shop and called, George. So the other bloke's name was George, too. A noise that sounded something like came from the back of the shop. George, where'd you just put that other box of pipes? George came in. He was a small, stoutish chap in short sleeves, with a bald head and a big, gingery-colored soup-strainer mustache. His jaw was working in a ruminative kind of way. Obviously, he'd been interrupted in the middle of his tea. The two of them started poking around in search of the other boxes of pipes. It was about 5 minutes before they ran into earth behind some bottles of sweets. It's wonderful the amount of litter they managed to accumulate in those frozy little shops where the whole stock is worth about 50 quid. I watched old Elsie poking about among the litter and mumbling to herself. Do you know the kind of shuffling, round-shouldered movements of an old woman who's lost something? No use trying to describe to you what I felt. A kind of cold, deadly, desolate feeling. You can't conceive it unless you've had it. All I can say is, if there was a girl you used to care about 25 years ago, go and have a look at her now. Then perhaps you'll know what I felt. But as a matter of fact, the thought was chiefly in my mind was how differently things turned out from what you expect. The times I had with Elsie, the July nights under the chestnut trees, wouldn't you think it would leave some kind of after effect behind? You'd have thought that time would ever come when there would be just no feelings whatever between us. Here was I, and here was she. Our bodies might be a yard apart, yet, and we were just as much strangers as though we'd never met. As for her, she didn't even recognize me. If I told her who I was, very likely she wouldn't remember. And if she did remember, what would she feel? Just nothing. Probably wouldn't even be angry because I'd done the dirty on her. It was as if the whole thing had never happened. And on the other hand, who ever had foreseen that Elsie would end up like this? She seemed the kind of girl who bound to go to the devil. I know there'd be at least one other man before I had met her, and it's safe to bet there were others between me and the second George. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that she'd had a dozen altogether. I treated her badly, there's no question about that, and many a time it had given me a bad half hour. She'll end up on the streets, I used to think, or stick her head in the gas oven. And sometimes I felt I'd been a bit of a bastard, but other times I reflected, what was true enough, that if I hadn't been me, it would have been someone else. But you see, the way things happen, the kind of dull, pointless way. How many women really end up on the streets? A damn sight more end up at the mangle. She didn't go to the bad or to the good either. Just ended like everyone else, a fat old woman muddling about a frowsy little shop with a gingery mustached George to call her own. Probably got a string of kids as well. Mrs. George Cookson lived respected and died lamented, and might die this side of the bankrupt court if she was lucky. They'd found the box of pipes, of course. There weren't any with amber mouthpiece among them. I don't know as we got any amber ones just as present, sir. Not amber. We got some nice Volsonate ones. I wanted an amber one, I said. We got some nice pipes there. She held out one. That's a nice pipe, now. Alpha crown, and that one is. I took it, our fingers touched. No kick, no reaction. The body doesn't remember. And I suppose you think I bought the pipe, just for old sake, to put half a crown in Elsie's pocket, but no, a bit of it. But not a bit of it. I didn't want the thing. I didn't smoke a pipe. I'd merely been making it a pretend to come into the shop. I turned it over in my finger and then put it down on the counter. Doesn't matter, I'll leave it, I said. Give me a small players. I had to buy something after all that fuss. George the second, or maybe the third or fourth, rounded out a pocket of players, still munching away beneath his mustache. I could see he was sulky because I dragged him away from his tea for nothing. But it seemed too damn silly to waste half a crown. I cleared out. That was the last I ever saw of Elsie. I went back to the George at the dinner. Afterwards, I went out with some vague idea of going to the pictures if they were open, but instead I landed up in one of those big, noisy pubs in the new part of town. There I ran into a couple of chaps from Staffordshire who were travelling in the hardware, and we got talking about the state of trade and playing darts and drinking Guinness. By closing time, we were both so boozed that I had to take them home in a taxi, and I was a bit under the weather myself, and the next morning I woke up with the worse head than ever. Chapter 5. But I had to see the pool at Binfield House. I felt really bad that morning. The fact was that never since I struck Lower Binfield, I've been drinking almost consistently from every opening time to every closing time. The reason thought it hadn't occurred to me till this minute was that really there been nothing else to do. That was all my trip had amounted to so far, 3 days on the booze. The same as the next other morning. I crawled over to the window and watched the bowler hats and school caps hustling to and fro. My enemies, I thought. The conquering army that sacked the town and covered the ruins with fag ends and paper bags. I wonder why I cared. You think I dare say that if it had given me a jolt to find Lower Binfield swollen into a dark Dangeham, it was merely because I didn't like to see the earth getting fuller and country turning into town. But it isn't that at all. I don't mind towns growing, so long as they do grow and don't merely spread like gravy over a tablecloth. I know that people have got to have somewhere to live, and that if a factory isn't in one place, it'll be in another. And for the picturesques, the shame counter-filled stuff, the oak plant panels and the pewter dishes and copper warming pans and whatnot, it merely gives me the sick. Whenever we were in the old days, we weren't picturesque. Mother would never have seen any sense in the antiques that Wendy had filled our house with. She didn't like gatelage tables. She said they caught your legs. As for pewter, she wouldn't have it in the house. Nasty, greasy stuff, she called it. And yet, say what you like, there was something that we had in those days and haven't got now. Something that you probably can't have in a streamlined milk bar with the radio playing. I'd come back to look for it, and I hadn't found it. And yet, something I had between it even now, when I hadn't got my new teeth and in my belly was crying out for an aspirin and a cup of tea. And that started me thinking again about the pool at Binfield House. After seeing what they'd done to the town, I'd had a feeling you could only describe as fear about going to see whether the pool still existed, and yet it might. There was no knowing. The town was smothered under red brick. Our house was full of Wendy and her junk, and Thames was poisoned with motor oil and paper bags. But maybe the pool was still there, with the great black fish still cruising around it. Maybe even it was still hidden in the woods, and from that day to this no one had discovered it existed. It was quite possible. It was a very thick bit of woods, full of brambles and rotten bushes. The beech trees gave way to oaks round about them, which made the undergrowth thicker, the kind of place most people don't care to penetrate. Queer things have happened. I don't start out till late afternoon. It must have been about 4:30 when I took the car out and drove on to the upper Binfield Road. Halfway up the hill, the houses thinned out and stopped, and beech trees began. The road forks about there, and I took the right-hand fork, meaning to make a detour round and come back to Binfield House on the road. But presently I stopped to have a look at the corpse I was driving through. The copse. The beech trees seemed just the same. Lord, how they were the same. I backed the car on a bit of the grass beside the road under a fall of chalk and got out and walked. Just the same. The same stillness, the same great beds of rustling leaves that seemed to go on for year to year without rotting. Not a creature stirring except the small birds in the tree-tops which you couldn't see. It wasn't easy to believe that the great noise mess of a town was barely 3 miles away. I began to make my way through the little copse in the direction of Binfield House. I could vaguely remember how the path went, and Lord, yes, the same chalk hollow where the Black Hand went and had catapult shots, and Did Lovegrove told us how babies were born the day I caught my first fish, pretty near 40 years ago. As the trees thinned out again, you could see the other road and the wall of Binfield House. The old rotting wooden fence was gone, of course, and they put up a high brick wall with spikes on top, such as you'd expect to see around a loony bin. I'd puzzled for some time about how to get into Binfield House until finally it struck me that I had only to tell that my wife was mad and was looking for somewhere to put her. After that, they'd be quite ready to show me round the grounds. In my new suit, I'd probably look prosperous enough to have a wife in a private asylum. It wasn't till I was actually at the gate that it occurred to me to wonder whether the pool was still in sight inside the grounds. The old grounds of Binfield House had covered 50 acres. I suppose on the grounds of the loony bin weren't likely to be more than 5 or 10. They wouldn't have a great pool of water for the loonies to drown themselves in. The lodge where the old Hodges used to live was the same as ever, but the yellow brick wall and the huge iron gates were new. From the glimpse I got through the gates, I could have known the place. Gravel walks, flower beds, lawns, and a few aimless-looking types of wandering about. Loonies, I suppose. I strolled up to the road to the right. The pool, the big pool, the one where I used to fish, was a couple of 100 yards behind the house. It might have been 100 yards before I got to the corner of the wall, so the pool was outside the grounds. The trees seemed to have got much thinner. I could hear children's voices, and gosh, there was the pool. I stood for a moment, wondering what happened to it. Then I saw what it was. All the trees were gone from round its edges. It looked all bare and different. In fact, it looked extraordinarily like the round pond in Kensington Gardens. Kids were playing all around the edge, sailing boats and paddling, and a few rather old kids were rushing about in those little canoes which you work by turning a handle. Over to the left there was an old rotting boathouse used to stand among the reeds, where the sort of pavilion and sweet kiosk, and a huge white notice saying, Upper Binfield Model Yacht Club. I took over to the right. It was all houses, 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 houses. One might as well have been in the outer suburbs. All the woods that used to grow beyond the pool, and grew so thick that you were like a kind of tropical jungle, had been shaved flat. Only a few clumps of trees still stand around the houses. There were artsy-looking houses, another of those sham Tudor colonies, like the ones I'd seen the first day at the top of Chamford Hill, only more so. What a fool I'd been to imagine that these woods were still the same. I saw how it was. There was just the only bit of copse, 6 acres, perhaps, that hadn't been cut down, and it was pure chance that I'd walked through it on my way here. Upper Binfield, which had been merely a name in the old days, had grown into a decent-sized town. In fact, it was merely an outlying chunk of Lower Binfield. I wandered up to the edge of the pool. The kids were splashing about and making the devil of a noise. There seemed to be a swarm of them. The water looked kind of dead, no fish in it now. There was a chap standing watching the kids. He was an oldish chap with a bald head and a few tufts of white hair and a pince nez and a very sunburnt face. There was something vaguely queer about his appearance. He was wearing shorts and sandals and one of those salient shirts up at the neck, I noticed. But what really struck me was the look in his eyes. He had very blue eyes that kind of twinkled at you from behind his spectacles. I could see that he was one of those old men who had never grown up. They're always either health food cranks or else, and they have something to do with the Boy Scouts in either case. They're great ones of nature and the open air. He was looking at me if he didn't like to speak. Upper Binfield grows a great deal, I said. He twinkled at me. Grow, my dear sir. We never allow Upper Binfield to grow. We pride ourselves on being rather exceptional people up here, you know. It's a little colony of us all by ourselves. No interlopers, tee-hee. I mean, compared to with before the war, I said. Used to live here as a boy. Ah, no doubt. Before my time, of course, but the Upper Binfield estate is something rather special in the way of building estates, you know. Quite a little world of its own. All designed by young Edward Watkin, the architect. You've heard of him, of course? We live in the mists of nature up here, no connection with the town down there. He waved a hand in the direction of Lower Binfield, the dark Stannick Mills, tee-hee. He had a benevolent old chuckle in the way of wrinkling his face up like a rabbit. I immediately, as though I'd asked him, he began telling me about the Upper Binfield estate and young Edwin Watkin, the architect, who had such a feeling for the tutor and was such a wonderful fellow that finding genuine Elizabeth beams in old farmhouse and buying them at ridiculous prices. And such an interesting young fellow, quite the life and soul of the nudist parties. He repeated a number of times that they were very exceptional people in Upper Binfield, quite different from Lower Binfield. They were determined to enrich the countries inside of defiling it. I'm using his own phrases, and there weren't any public houses on the estate. They talk of their garden cities, but we call Upper Binfield the woodland city, tee-hee, nature. We waved a hand at the way left of the trees. The primeval forest brooding around us. Our young people grow up amid surroundings of natural beauty. We are nearly all of us enlightened people, of course. Would you credit that 3/4 of us up here are vegetarians? The local butchers don't like us at all, tee-hee. And some quite eminent people live here. Miss Helena Thurlow, the novelist, you've heard of her, of course, and Professor Wood, the psychic research worker. Such a poetic character. He goes wandering out into the woods, and the family can't find him at meal times. He says he's walking among the fairies. Do you believe in fairies? I admit, I am just a wee bit skeptical, but his photographs are most convincing. I began to wonder whether he was coming who had escaped from Binfield House. Whether he was someone who had escaped from Binfield House. But no, he was sane enough. After a fashion, I knew the type. Vegetarianism, simple life, poetry, nature worship, roll in the dew before breakfast. I met a few of these years ago in Ealing. He began to show me around the east estate. There was nothing left of the woods. It was all houses, and what houses? Do you know what these faked up Tudor houses with the curly roofs and the buttresses that don't buttress anything, and the rock gardens with concrete bird paths, and those red plaster elves you can buy at the florist's? You can see in your mind's eyes that the awful gang of food cranks and spook hunters and simple lifers with £1,000 a year that live there. Even the pavements were crazy. I didn't let him take me far. Some of the houses made me wish I had got a hand grenade in my pocket. I tried to damp him down by asking whether people didn't object to living so near the lunatic asylum, but it didn't have much effect. Finally, I stopped and said, "There used to be another pool beside the big one. I can't be far from here." "Another pool? Oh, surely not. I don't think there was ever another pool." "They may have drained it off," I said. "It was a pretty deep pool. It would leave a big pit behind." For the first time he looked a bit uneasy. He rubbed his nose. "Ah, of course. You must understand our life up here is in some kind of way primitive. The simple life, you know. We prefer it so. But being so far from the town, it is inconveniences of course. Some of our sanitary arrangements are not altogether satisfactory. The dust cart only calls once a month, I believe." "You mean you've turned the pool into a rubbish dump?" "Well, there is something in the nature of he shield at the word rubbish dump. We have to dispose of tins and so forth, of course, over there behind the clump of trees. We went across there. They let a few trees to hide it, but yes, there it was. It was a pool, all right. They drained the water off. It might have a great round hole like an enormous well, 20 or 30 feet deep. Already it was full, half full of tin cans. I stood looking at the tin cans. It's a pity they drained it, I said. There used to be some big fish in that pool. Fish? Oh, I never heard anything about that. Of course, we could hardly have a pool of water here among the houses. The mosquitoes, you know, but it was before my time. I suppose their houses have been built a good long time, I said. Oh, 10 or 15 years, I think. I used to know this place before the war, I said. It was all wooden then. There weren't any houses except Binfield House, but the little bit of copse over there hadn't changed. I'll walk through it on my way here. Ah, that is sacrosanct. We have decided never to build on it. It is sacred to the young people. Nature, you know, he twinkled at me, a kind of roguish look as if he was letting me into a little secret. We call it the Pixie Glen. The Pixie Glen, I got rid of him, went back to the car and drove down to the lower Binfield. The Pixie Glen, and they'd filled my pool up with tin cans, got rod them and bust them. Say what you like, call it silly, childish, anything, but doesn't it make you puke sometimes to see that what they're doing to England? What their bird baths and their plaster gnomes and their pixies and tin cans where the beech woods used to be. Sentimental, you say, antisocial, oughtn't to prefer trees to men. I say it depends what trees and what men. Know that there aren't anything one can do about it except to wish them the pox in their guts. One thing, I thought as I drove down the hill, I'm finished with this notion of getting back into the past. What's that good of trying to revisit the scenes of your boyhood? They don't exist. Coming up for air. But there isn't any air. The dustbin that we're in reaches up to the stratosphere all the time. I didn't particularly care. After all, I thought, I've still got 3 days left. I had a bit of peace and quiet and stopped bothering about what they'd done to Lower Binfield. As for my idea of going fishing, that was off, of course. Fishing, indeed. At my age, really, Hilda was right. I dumped the car in the garage of the George and walked into the lounge. It was 6 o'clock. Somebody had switched on the wireless, and the news broadcast was beginning. I came through the door just in time to hear the last few words of an SOS, and it gave me a bit of jolt, I admit, for the words I were hearing. Where his wife, Hilda Bowling, is seriously ill. The next instant, the plumbing voice went on. Here is another SOS. Will Percival Chutt, who was last heard of, but I didn't wait to hear any more. I just walked straight on. What made me feel rather proud, when I thought it over afterwards, was that when I heard those words come out of the loudspeaker, I never turned an eyelash, not even a pause in my step, to let anyone know that I was George Bowling, whose wife Hilda Bowling was seriously ill. The landlord's wife was in the lounge, and she knew my name was Bowling. At any rate, she'd seen it in the register. Otherwise, there was nobody there except a couple of chaps who were staying in the George and who didn't know me from Adam. But I kept my head, not a sign to anyone. I merely walked on into the private bar, which had just opened, and ordered my pint as usual. I had to think it over, but the time I had drank about half the pint, I began to get the bearings of the situation. In the first place, Hilda wasn't ill, seriously or otherwise. I knew that. She'd been perfectly well when I came away, and it wasn't the time of the year for flu or anything of that kind. She was shamming. Why? Obviously, it was just another of her hot dodges. It was. She got wind somehow. Trust Hilda that I wasn't really at Birmingham, and that this was just her way of getting me home. Couldn't bear to think of me any longer with that other woman, because of course she'd taken it for granted that I was with a woman. Can't imagine any other motive, and naturally she assumed that I'd come rushing home as soon as I heard she was ill. But that's just what you've got it wrong. I thought to myself as I finished off the pint, I'm too cute to be caught that way. I remember the dodges she'd pulled before, and the extraordinary trouble she'd taken to catch me out. I've even known her, when I'd been on some journey she was suspicious about, and checked it all up with a Bradshaw and a road map, just to see whether I was telling the truth about my movements. And then, when there was that time when she followed me all the way to Colchester and suddenly burst in on me at the Temperance Hotel. And that time, unfortunately, she happened to be right, at least. She wasn't, but there was circumstances which made it look as if she was. I hadn't the slightest belief that she was ill. In fact, I knew she wasn't, although I couldn't say exactly how. I had another pint, and things looked better, of course. There was a row coming when I got home, but there had been a row anyway. I've got 3 good days ahead of me, I thought. Curiously enough, now that the things I'd come to look at for had turned out to not exist, the idea of having a bit of holiday appealed to me all the bit more. Being away from home, that was the great thing. Peace, perfect peace, with loved ones far away, as the hymn puts it. And suddenly I decided that I would have a woman, if I had felt like it. It would serve Hilda right for being so dirty-minded, and besides, where's the sense of being suspected if it isn't true? But as the second pang worked inside me, the thing began to amuse me. I hadn't fallen for it, but it was damned ingenious all the same. I wondered how she managed about the SOS. I've no idea what the procedure is. Do you have to have a doctor certificate, or do you just send your name in? I felt pretty sure that it was a Wheeler woman who put her up onto it. It seemed to me to have the Wheeler touch, but all the same, the cheek of it, the length that women will go to. Sometimes you can't help kind of admiring them. Chapter 6. After breakfast, I strolled out into the market place. It was a lovely morning, kind of cool and still, with a pale yellow light like white wine playing over everything. The fresh smell of the morning was mixed up with the smell of my cigar, but there was a zooming noise from behind the houses, and suddenly a fleet of great black bombers came whizzing over. I looked up at them. They seemed to be bang overhead. The next moment I heard something, and at the same movement, if you happened to be there, you'd have seen an interesting instance of what I believe is called conditioned reflex, because what I heard, that wasn't any question of mistake, was the whistle of a bomb. I hadn't heard such of a thing for 20 years, but I didn't need to be told what it was, and without taking any kind of thought, I did the right thing. I flung myself on my face. After all, I'm glad and you didn't see me. I suppose I looked dignified. I was flattened on the pavement like a rat when it squeezed under a door. Nobody else had been half as prompt. I'd acted so quickly that in the split second while the bomb was whistling down, I even had time to be afraid that I was all a mistake and I'd made a fool of myself for nothing. But the next moment, boom, brrr, a noise like the day of judgment, and the noise like a ton of coal falling on a sheet of tin. That was falling bricks. I seemed to kind of melt into the pavement. It started, I thought. I knew it. Old Hitler didn't wait, just sent his bombers across without warning. And yet, here's a peculiar thing. Even in the echo of that awful, deafening crash, which seemed to freeze me up for a tone top to toe, I had time to think that there's something grand about the bursting of a big projectile. What does it sound like? It's hard to say, because what you hear is mixed up with what you are frightened of. Mainly, it gives you a vision of bursting metal. You seem to see great sheets of iron bursting open, but the peculiar thing is the feeling it gives you of being suddenly shoved up against reality. It's like being woken up by somebody shying a bucket of water over you. You're suddenly dragged out of the dreams by a clang of bursting metals, and it's terrible, and it's real. There was a sound of screams and yells, and also of cars' brakes being suddenly jammed on. The second bomb, which I was waiting for, didn't fall. I raised my head a little. On every side, people seemed to be rushing round and screaming. A car was skidding diagonally across the road. I could hear a woman's voice shrieking, "The Germans, the Germans!" To the right, I had a vague impression of a man, round white face, rather like a wrinkled paper bag, looking down at me. He was kind of dithering. "What is it? What's happening? What are they doing?" "It started," I said. "That was a bomb. Lie down." But still the second bomb didn't fall. Another quarter of a minute or so, and I raised my head again. Some of the people were still rushing about. Others were standing as if they had been glued to the ground. After somewhere behind the houses a huge haze of dust had risen up, and though a black jet of smoke was streaming upwards, and when I saw an extraordinary sight. At the other end of the marketplace, the high street rises a little, and down this little hill a herd of pigs were galloping, a sort of huge flood of pig faces. The next moment, of course, I saw what it was. It wasn't pigs at all. It was only the school children in their gas masks. I suppose they were bolting for some cellar where they'd been told to take cover in case of air raids. At the back of them I could even make out a taller pig who was probably Miss Todgers, but I tell you for a moment they look exactly like a herd of pigs. I picked myself up and walked across the marketplace. People were calming down already, and quite a little crowd had begun to flock toward the place where the bomb had dropped. Oh yes, you're right, of course. It wasn't a German aeroplane after all. The war hadn't broken out. It was only an accident. The planes were flying over for a bit of bombing practice at any rate, and they were carrying bombs, and somebody had put his hand on the lever by mistake. I expect he got a good ticking off for it. By the time that the postmaster had rung up London to ask whether there was a war on, and been told that there wasn't, everyone had grasped that it was an accident. But there had been a space of time, something between a minute and 5 minutes, when several thousand people believed there was a war. A good job it didn't last any longer. Another quarter of an hour, and we'd had been lynching out for a spy. I followed the crowd. The bomb had dropped in a little side street of the high street, the one with Uncle Ezekiel's shop used to be. As it came around the corner, I could hear voices murmuring, "Ooh," a kind of odd noise, as if they were fighting over getting a big kick out of it. Frightened over getting a big kick out of it. Luckily, I got there a few minutes before the ambulance and the fire engine, and in the spite of the 50 people or so that had already collected, I saw everything. At first, it looked as if the sky had been rained bricks and vegetables. There were cabbage leaves everywhere. The bomb had blown a green grocer's shop out of existence, and the house to the right of it had part of its roof blown off, and the roof beams were on fire, and all the houses around had been more or less damaged, and then there were windows smashed. But what everyone was looking at was the house on the left. Its wall, the one that joined the green grocer's shop, was ripped off as neatly as if someone had done it with a knife. And what was extraordinary was that in the upstairs room nothing had been touched. It was just like looking into the doll's house. Chests of drawers, bedrooms, chairs, faded wallpapers, and bed not yet made, and Jerry under the bed, all exactly as it had been lived in, except that one wall was gone. But the lower rooms had caught the force of the explosion. There was a frightful smashed-up mess of bricks, plaster, chair legs, bits of a varnished dresser, rags of tablecloths, piles of broken plates, chunks of scullery sink, a jar of marmalade, and I rolled across the floor, leaving a long streak of marmalade behind them, running side by side with it. There was a ribbon of blood, but among the broken crockery there was lying a leg, just a leg, with the trousers still on it, and a black boot with wood milne rubber heel. This was what people were oohing and awing about. I had a good look at it and took it in. The blood was beginning to get mixed up with the marmalade. When the fire engine arrived, I cleared off to the George to pack my bag. This finished me with Lower Binfield, I thought. I'm going home, but as a matter of fact, I did shake the dust off my shoes and leave immediately. One never does. When anything like this happens, people stand about and discuss it for hours. There wasn't much work done in the old parts of Lower Binfield that day. Everyone was so busy talking about the bomb, which it sounded like what they thought when they heard it. The barmaid in the George said it fair gave her the shudders. She said she'd never sleep sound in her bed again, and what did you expect? It just showed what these here bombs you never knew. A woman that with these here bombs you never knew. A woman had bitten off part of her tongue owing to the jump the explosion gave her. It turned out that whereas at our end of the town everyone had imagined it was a German air raid, everyone at the other end had taken it for granted there was an explosion at the stocking factory. Afterwards, I got this out of the paper. The Air Ministry sent a chap to inspect the damage and issued a report saying that the effects of the bomb were disappointing. As a matter of fact, it only killed 3 people. The green grocer, Parrot his was name, and an old couple who lived next door. The woman wasn't much smashed about, and they identified the old man by his boots, but they never found a trace of Parrot, not even a trouser button, to read the burial service over. In the afternoon, I paid my bill and hooked in. I didn't have much more than 3 quid left after I had paid the bill. They knew how to cut it out of these dolled-up country hotels, and what with drinks and other odds and ends, I'd been shying money about pretty freely. I left my new rod and the rest of the fishing tackle in my bedroom. Let 'em keep it. No use to me. It was merely a quid that I'd chucked down the drain to teach myself a lesson. And I'd learnt the lesson all right. Fat men of 45 can't go fishing. The kind of thing doesn't happen any longer. It's just a dream. There'll be no more fishing this side of the grave. It's funny how things sink into you by degrees. What had I really felt when the bomb exploded? At the actual moment, of course, it scared the wits out of me, and when I saw the smashed-up house and the old man's leg, I had the kind of mild kick that you get from seeing a street accident. Disgusting, of course, quite enough to make me fed up with the so-called holiday, but it hadn't really made my impression. But as I got clear of the outskirts of Lower Binfield and turned the car eastward, it came back to me. You know how it is when you're in a car alone. There's something either in the hedges flying past you or in the throb of the engine that gets you your thoughts running in a certain rhythm. You have the same feeling sometimes when you're in the train. It's a feeling of being able to see things in better perspective than usual. All kinds of things that I'd been doubtful about I feel certain about now. To begin with, I'd come to Lower Binfield with a question in my mind. What's ahead of us? Is the game really up? Can we get back to the life we used to live? Or is it gone forever? Well, I'd had my answer. The old life's finished, and to go back to Lower Binfield, you can't put Jonah back into the whale. I knew, though, I didn't expect you to follow my train of thought, and it was a queer thing I'd done coming here. All those years Lower Binfield had been tucked away somewhere or other in my mind, a sort of queer corner that I could step back into whenever I felt it. And I finally stepped back into it and found that it didn't exist. I chucked pineapples into my dreams, and the less there should be any mistake, the Royal Air Force had flown up with 500 pounds of TNT. War is coming, 1941, they say, and there'll be plenty of broken crockery and little houses ripped open like packaging cases, and the guts of chartered accountants' clerks plastered over the piano that he's buying on the Never Never. But what does that kind of thing matter anyways? I'll tell you what my stay in Lower Binfield had taught me, and it was this. It's all going to happen. All the things you've got at the back of your mind and the things you're terrified of, the things that you'll never yourself are just a nightmare or only happen in foreign countries. The bombs, the foods queues, the rubber truncheons, the barbed wire, the colored shirts, the slogans, the enormous faces, the machine guns squirting out of bedroom windows. It's all going to happen. I know it. At any rate, I knew it all. There's no escape. Fight against it if you like, or look the other way and pretend not to notice, or grab your spanner and rush out to a bit of face smashing along with the others. But there's no way out. It's just something that's going to happen. I trod on the grass, and the old car whizzed up and down the little hills. And the cows in the elm trees and fields of wheat rushed past till the engine was pretty nearly red hot. I felt it more the same mood as I'd felt that day in January when I was coming down the Strand, the day I got my new false teeth. It was as though the power of prophecy had been given me. It seemed to me that I could see the whole of England and all the people in it, and all the things that'll happen to me happen to all of them. Sometimes, of course, even then, I have a doubt or two. The world is very large. That's a thing you notice when you're driving about in your car, and in a way it's reassuring. Think of the enormous stretches of land you pass over when you cross a corner of a single English country. It's like Siberia, and the field and beach spinies and farmhouses and churches and the villages with their little grocery shops and the parish hall and the ducks walking across the green. Surely it's too big to be changed, bound to remain more or less the same. Presently I struck into outer London and followed the Uxbridge Road as far as Southall. Miles and miles of ugly houses with people living dull, decent lives inside them. And beyond it, London stretched out and on, streets, squares, back alleys, tenements, blocks of flats, pubs, fried fish shops, picture houses, on and on for 20 miles. And all the 8 million people with their little private lives, which they didn't want to have altered. The bombs aren't made that could smash it out of existence. And the chaos of it, the privateness of all those lives. John Smith cutting out the football coupon. Bill Williams swapping stories in the barbers. Mrs. Jones coming home with the supper beer. 8 million of them. Surely they'll manage somehow, bombs or no bombs, to keep on with their lives that they have been used to. Illusion, baloney. It doesn't matter how many of them they are. They're all for it. The bad times are coming, and the streamlined men are coming too. What's coming afterwards, I don't know. It hardly ever interests me. I only know if there's anything you care a curse about, better say goodbye to it now, because everything you've ever known is going down into the muck, with the machine guns rattling all the time. But when I got back to the suburb, my mood changed suddenly. It suddenly struck me, and it hadn't even crossed my mind till the moment, that Hilda might really be ill after all. That's the effect of the environment, you see. In Lower Binfield, I'd taken it absolutely for granted that she wasn't ill and was merely shamming in the order to get me home. It had seemed natural at the time, I don't know why. But as I drove into West Bletchley and the Hesperides estate closed round me like a kind of red brick prison, which is what it is, the ordinary habits of thought came back I had this kind of Monday morning feeling when something seemed bleak and sensible. I saw the bloody rot in it was. This business that I wasted the last 5 days on, sneaking off to Lower Binfield to try to recover the past, and then in the car, coming home, thinking a lot of prophetic baloney about the future. The future. That's the future got to do with the chaps like you and me, holding down our jobs. That's our future. As for Hilda, even when the bombs are dropping, she'll be still talking about the price of butter. And suddenly, I saw what a fool I'd been to think she'd do a thing like that. Of course, the SOS wasn't a fake. As though she'd have the imagination, it was just the plain cold truth. She wasn't shamming at all. She was really ill. And gosh, at this moment, she might be lying somewhere in a ghastly pain, or even dead, for all I knew. And the thought sent a most horrible pang of fright through me, a sort of dreadful cold feeling in my guts. I whizzed down Ellesmere Road at nearly 40 miles an hour, and instead of taking the car to lock up garage as usual, I stopped outside the house and jumped out. So I'm fond for Hilda after all, you say. Don't know exactly what you mean by fond. Are you fond of your own face? Probably not, but you can't imagine yourself without it. It's part of you. Well, that's how I felt about Hilda. When things are going well, I can't stick the sight of her, but the thought that she might be dead or even in pain sent the shivers through me. I fumbled with the key, got the door open, and the familiar smell of the old Macintoshes hit me. Hilda, I yelled. Hilda. No answer for a moment. I was yelling, Hilda, Hilda, into utter silence, and some cold sweat started out of my backbone. Maybe they carted her away to a hospital already. Maybe there was a corpse lying upstairs in the empty house. I started to dash up the stairs, but at the same moment, the two kids in the pajamas came out of the room on either side of the landing. It was 8 or 9 o'clock, I suppose. At any rate, the light was just beginning to fail. Lorna hung over the banisters. Oh, Daddy, oh, it's Daddy. When have you come back? Why have you come back today? Mummy said you weren't coming till Friday. Where's your mother? I said. Mummy's out. She went out with Mrs. Wheeler. Why have you come home today, Daddy? Then your mother hasn't been ill? No. Why, she said she'd been ill, Daddy. Who said she'd been ill, Daddy? Have you been in Birmingham? Yes. Get back to bed now. You'll be catching cold. But where's your presents, Daddy? What presents? The presents you brought us from Birmingham. You'll see them in the morning, I said. Oh, Daddy, can't we see them tonight? No, dry up. Go back to bed or I'll wallop the pair of you. So she wasn't ill after all. She had been shamming. And really, I hardly knew what to be glad or sorry. I turned back to the front door, which I left open, and there, as large as life, was Hilda coming up the garden path. I looked at her as she came toward me in the last of the evening light. It was queer to think that less than 3 minutes earlier I had been in the devil of a stew, with actual cold sweat on my backbone, as the thought that she might be dead. Well, she wasn't dead. She was just as usual, old Hilda, with her thin shoulders and her anxious face, and the gas bill and the school fees and the Macintoshy smell in the office on Monday. All the bedroom facts that you invariably come back to, the eternal verities, as old Porteous calls them. I could see that Hilda wasn't in too good a temper. She darted me a little quick look, like she does something sometimes when she's got something on her mind. The kind of look some little thin animal, a weasel for instance, might give you. She didn't seem surprised to see me back, however. Oh, so you're back already, are you? She said. It seemed pretty obvious that I was back, and I didn't answer. She didn't make any move to kiss me. There's nothing for your supper, she went on promptly. That's Hilda all over. Always managed to say something depressing in an instant you set foot inside the house. I wasn't expecting you. You'll have to have bread and cheese, but I don't think we've got any cheese. I followed her indoors into the smell of Macintoshes. We went into the sitting room. I shut the door and switched on the light. I meant to get my say in first, and I knew it would make things better off if I took a strong line from the start. Now, I said, what the bloody hell do you mean by playing the trick on me? She just laid her back down on the top of the radio, and for a moment she looked genuinely surprised. What trick? What do you mean? Singing the SOS. What SOS? What are you talking about, George? Are you trying to tell me you didn't get them to send out an SOS saying you were seriously ill? Of course I didn't. How could I? I wasn't ill. What would I do if things like that? What would I do a thing like that for? I began to explain, but almost before I began, I saw what had happened. It was all a mistake. I only heard the last few words of the SOS, and obviously it was some other Hilda Bowling. I suppose there'd be scores of Hilda Bowling if you looked the name up in the directory. It just was the kind of dull, stupid mistake that's always happening. Hilda hadn't even shown that little bit of imagination I'd credited her with. The sole interest in the whole affair had been the 5 minutes or so when I thought she was dead and found that I cared after all. But that was over and done with. While I explained, she was watching me, and I could see in her eye that there was trouble of some kind coming. And then she began questioning me in what I call her third-degree voice, which isn't that you might expect angry and nabbing, but quite quiet and kind of watchful. So you heard this SOS in the hotel in Birmingham? Yes, last night on the national broadcast. When did you leave Birmingham then? This morning, of course. I planned out the journey in my mind, just in case that there should be any need to lie my way out of it. Left at 10, lunch at Coventry, tea at Bedford. I'd got it all mapped out. So you thought last night I was seriously ill, and you didn't even leave till this morning. But I tell you, I didn't think you were ill. Haven't I explained? I thought it was just another of your tricks. It sounded a damn sight more likely. Then I'm rather surprised you left at all, she said with so much vinegar in her voice that I knew there was something more coming. But she went on more quietly. So you left this morning, did you? Yes, I left about 10. I had lunch at Coventry. Then how do you account for this? She suddenly shot out at me, and in the same instant she ripped her bag open, took out a piece of paper, and held it out as if it had been a forged check or something. I felt as if something had hit me in a sock in the wind. I might have known it. She caught me after all. And there was the evidence, the dossier of the case. I didn't even know what it was, except that it was something that proved I'd been off with a woman. All the stuffing went out of me. A moment earlier, I'd been kind of bullying her, making out to be angry because I had been dragged back from Birmingham for nothing, and now she'd suddenly turned the tables on me. You don't have to tell me what I look like at the moment. I know, guilt written all over me in big letters, I know, and I wasn't even guilty, but it's a matter of habit. I'm used to being in the wrong. For 100 quid, I couldn't have kept the guilt out of my face as I answered. What do you mean? What's that thing you've got there? You read it and you'll see what it is. I took it. It was a letter from what seemed to be a firm of solicitors, and it was addressed from the same street as Rawbottom's Hotel, I noticed. Dear Madam, I read, with reference to your letter of the 18th inst, we think that must be some mistake. Rawbottom's Hotel was closed down 2 years ago. It was converted into a block of offices. No one answering the description of your husband has been here. Possibly. I don't read any further, of course. I saw it was all in a flash. I had been a little bit too clever and put my foot in it. There was just one faint ray of hope. Young Saunders might have forgotten to post the letter I'd addressed from Rawbottom's, in which case it was just possible I could brazen it out. But Hilda soon put the lid on the idea. Well, George, you see what the letter says. The day you left here I wrote to Rawbottom's Hotel. Oh, just a little note, asking them whether you'd arrived there. And you see the answer I got? There isn't even any such place as Rawbottom's Hotel. And the same day, the very same post, I got your letter saying you were at the hotel. You got someone to post it for you, I suppose. That was your business in Birmingham. But look here, Hilda, you've got it all wrong. It wasn't what you think. You don't understand. Oh, yes, I do. I perfectly understand. I understand perfectly. But look, Hilda. Wasn't any use, of course. It was a fair cop. It couldn't even meet her eye. I turned and tried to make for the door. I'll have to take the car round to the garage, I said. Oh, no, George. You don't get out of it like that. You'll stay here and listen to what I've got to say, please. But damn it, I've got to switch the lights on, haven't I? It's past lighting up time. You don't want us to get fined. At that, she let me go, and I went out and switched the car light on. But when I came back, she was still standing there like a figure of doom, with the 2 letters, mine and the solicitor's, on the table in front of her. I'd got a little of my nerve back, and I had another try. Listen, Hilda, you've got hold of the wrong end of the stick about this business. I can explain the whole thing. I'm sure you could explain anything, George. That question is whether I'd believe you. But you're just jumping to conclusions. What made you write to these people, hotel people anyways? It was Mrs. Wheeler's idea, and a very good idea too, as it turned out. Oh, Mrs. Wheeler wasn't it. So you don't mind letting that blasted woman into your private affairs. She didn't need any letting in. It was she who warned me that you were up to this week. Something seemed to tell her, she said, and she was right, you see. She knows all about you, George. She used to have a husband just like you. But Hilda, I looked at her. Her face had gone a kind of white under the surface, the way it does when when she thinks of me with another woman, a woman, if only it had been true. And gosh, what I could see ahead of me. And you know what it's like, the weeks on end of ghastly nagging and sulking, and the catty remarks after you think peace has been signed, and the meal's always late, and the kids wanted to know what's it all about. But what really got me down was the kind of mental squalor, the kind of mental atmosphere in which the real reason why I'd got to Lower Binfield wouldn't even be conceivable. That was that chiefly struck me at the moment. If I spent a week explaining to Hilda why I'd been to Lower Binfield, she'd never understand, and who would understand here in Ellesmere Road? Gosh, did I even understand myself? The whole thing seemed to be fading out of my mind. Why had I gone to Lower Binfield? Had I gone there? In this atmosphere, it just seemed meaningless. Nothing's real in Ellesmere Road except gas bills, school fees, boiled cabbage, and the office on Monday. One more try. But look here, Hilda. I know what you think, but you're absolutely wrong. I swear to you're wrong. Oh, no, George. If I was wrong, why did you have to tell all those lies? No getting away from that, of course. I took a pace or two up and down. The smell of old Macintoshes was very strong. Why had I run away like that? Why had I bothered about the future and the past? Seeing that the future and the past don't matter. Whatever motives I might have had, I could hardly remember them now. The old life in Lower Binfield, the war and the after-war, Hitler, Stalin, bombs, machine guns, food queues, rubber truncheons, it was fading out, all fading out. Nothing remained except a vulgar, low-down row and a smell of old Macintoshes. One last try. Hilda, just listen to me a minute. Look here, you don't know where I've been all this week, do you? I don't want to know where you've been. I know what you've been doing. That's quite enough for me. But dash it, quite useless, of course. She found me guilty, and now she was going to tell me what she thought of me. That night take a couple of hours, and after that there was further trouble looming up, because presently it would occur to her to wonder where I'd got the money for this trip, and then she discovered that I'd been holding out on her about the 17 quid. Really, there was no reason why this row shouldn't go on till 3 a.m. No use playing injured innocent any longer. All I wanted was the line of least resistance, and in my mind I ran over the 3 possibilities, which were to tell her what I'd really been doing and somehow make her believe me. B, to pull the old gag about losing my memory. C, to let her go on thinking it was a woman and take my medicine. But damn it, I knew which it would have to be. Which, probably let her think it's a woman and take my medicine. And thus ends the reading. Sorry, I was stumbling a bit. I just drank a soda and my, I don't know, the sugar. I'm kind of like, I feel weird because I drank sugar and, I don't know. It just makes me dizzy. But hope you enjoyed Coming Up for Air by George Orwell. If you did, make sure to drop a like, and I'll see you guys later.